Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Freeway Bible Study for today, the second day of March 2018. We're on to Genesis 5, from Adam to Noah. But first, let's get from the parking lot out onto the freeway. I am going to treat myself, as I think I may do this in the future. I work every other Friday. On my Friday on, I might treat myself to a drive over the scenic pass, particularly for you guys, because I thought, why this boring old freeway every day, same old route stretch I take? Would it be nice to take a slightly different route? And so we're going to go on the 133, the toll road. It's going to cost me about $4 maybe. Like the cost of a cup of coffee at Starbucks. And also because I don't think this is going to be so long, because this is a pretty short chapter and there's not a lot to it, but I've come up with a couple of things I'd like to say. But before I actually begin, and here I go, I have to do my funky thing, which is I have to feels like I'm doing something wrong here. Stop, make a right turn. I want to get on the on-ramp right there. I have to come over here and then hang a U-turn here. I feel like I'm cheating, but otherwise I'll just sit there at the intersection for an hour because, like I say every day, the sensor in the ground won't pick up my bike. I gotta stop saying that because I'm sure you're getting bored hearing that. Here we go. Anyway, first I want to correct two errors on my own errors, or at least point them out, because that's and see, I can go through this right because I'm in the carpool lane. Why all these disclaimers? So usually when I'm getting on the freeway here, I would stay in this lane and just get on the 5, but we're going to move over a lane and get on the 133 north towards Riverside. Yahoo! Off we go. Oh, let me turn my thingamajiggy on here on the phone. Bang, bang, and we're off and running. I'm all about finding mistakes, particularly my own mistakes. And there were two this week. One of them was pointed out to me. Another one was pointed out to myself by myself. So the first was, remember back in, I think it was Genesis 2, the video I made for here's Orange County, there's the sunrise. See the big orange balloon straight ahead? That's the great park. That's El Toro Marine Base, I believe. It used to be, it's the remains of it. And then the sunrise, of course. And then way over there you can see what looks like almost like rain out there. Newport Beach and all those kind of stuff. I may stop and interject because this is a new route for us, the scenic route, so to speak. But I think it was in Genesis 2 that I pointed out that, for example, I gave a little evidence of what would make me believe, and I kind of, a little voice inside me was saying, "Don't do it," because I knew that I might be found out. It's not that I don't want to believe, it's just that I don't trust myself to even identify very well the criteria by which I would believe. As I can't remember just who it was that said that. I don't know what it would necessarily take me to make me believe. This was an atheist who said this. I don't know what it would make me to believe, but God certainly does, and could exercise that if they wanted to. Oh, by the way, I forgot my typical introduction because I'm still new to this. I'm only 5 videos in. Good morning, my name is Kurt Bell. I am a non-believer in any religion who is nevertheless interested in studying religion, and so I study the Bible and the Quran, and I've read other things like the Code of Hammurabi. I've read some of the Vedas. And I can't remember some of the things I've read others, but I'm in particular interested now in making a deliberate pass through the Bible, and from cover to cover, from from shining front cover to shining back cover, so to speak. And so I'm going to do so in the following manner. I read one chapter a day, typically twice, typically once in the King James Version, another in the New International Version. And I try to limit myself. I don't do a lot of lookups. I don't read a lot of footnotes. I kind of just read it, and maybe I'll look up a few historical things if I have time, if I can. But I try not to front load myself too much with interpretation. Instead, to simply read it. And I know that may seem like it opens the door to my ignorance coloring my interpretation. But at the same time, I would imagine that if the Bible really is what it is, that it would not be subject to guidance. I wouldn't necessarily need guidance. I'm sure the Catholics would disagree. That's what they were all about forever. That's why they didn't want the Bible to be translated into the common languages at the time. The whole thing with Martin Luther. So anyway, I'm getting way long-winded. Anyway, I've got to get this disclaimer down pat. But basically, I'm just a dude reading the Bible, trying to understand it. I don't believe, and so I then approach it with a rather critical eye. But just know that I do that with everything, including my own beliefs and my own principles. So, with that said, let's get back to my errors. I think it was in book 2. I said, if for example, it was revealed that in the long numeric string that is the infinite apparently loop string of numbers that is pi, there was some sort of a numeric code that said, I am here, in my own language and every language of the human language and every conceivable language of every alien in the universe. I mean, we wouldn't be able to verify that, but you get what I mean. That would give me pause to believe. Now, over on YouTube, a long-time viewer and friend of the channel, Jack, quickly pointed out to me, "Hey, Kurt, if you get a long enough string of numbers, not randomly, but a long enough string, eventually, if you assign some numeric code to a language, eventually that I am here is gonna show up. It's almost it's like a mathematical certainty." So, Kurt, you backed yourself into a corner there, Kurt. You gave yourself a criteria without really understanding or thinking about the full circumstance of the landscape that I was talking about, or even the mechanisms of mathematics and numbers. It is a good point. And then quickly, David, a longtime friend and thoughtful observer and commenter, David chimed in and said, "Yeah, there you go, Kurt. There's your I am here," which I read those two in quick succession on YouTube comments, and I was like, yeah. Now what? Because I had set myself for some criteria that were then within 24 hours. Those criteria were shown to me to have been met. And now what do I do? Do I now believe? And I actually thought about it. I mean, I actually was willing to do that. Maybe if you're hearing this, you might think I'm being disingenuous, but I sincerely was. I asked myself, okay, is this it? Is this the moment? And I thought about it more, and I thought about what Jack said. That it's inevitable that it's going to be in there. And just as inevitably there will be the words "I am not here," or it's turtles all the way down. Any arbitrary phrase or phrase with some meaning is going to show up in there somewhere in that infinite string of numbers. So it kind of it's like saying alphabet soup, right? I mean, if you shuffle the alphabet together in all the letters in a jar and then spill them out on the ground, eventually they're gonna. If you do that forever, eventually they're gonna spill out every conceivable thing. And it's the same thing about the monkeys and the typewriters, and let them type away. Eventually they're gonna type out a Shakespearean sonnet. These are not. We don't consider those things evidence of miraculous agency. We simply identify those as a consequence. Oh, I was just waving at a cop. Which is cool. I like to wave at cops, but they don't typically wave back. Motorcycle cop. But we don't necessarily consider that evidence of agency. It's evidence of the nature of things. And I came up with I was thinking about it a little further because I was uncomfortable with this. I felt like in a way like I was cheating, like I had given myself a criteria, been shown to me to have been met, and then I was back and weaseling out. That's the word. And then I thought of another example. I was trying to think of examples in science where, or non-science, where foolish wagers were made that were then later revealed to be that it wasn't that they were right or wrong necessarily, and maybe I'll have to take that back, but that the nature, it was a poorly formed question or a poorly formed challenge. That's the way to describe it, poorly formed. And I came up with one that I think will work. Max Planck, a great father of quantum physics. He kind of got off to a rough start in some ways, and there was a time in his career, and this is like back in the early 20th century. There was a time, early to mid 20th century, Max Planck. There was a time when if you had asked him at one point in his career, what is the nature of light, and he would have probably said, I'll eat my lederhosen if light is anything but a wave. He believed that the dual nature. I mean, the nature of light. We now know that light is both a particle and a wave, and he was pretty sure that it was a wave. And then I'm sure that at some point someone must have came to him and said, with holding the lederhosen, his lederhosen in hand, and saying, Mr. Planck, here, have you heard the theories and ideas of Herr Einstein, who had introduced the concept of the quanta, and then his theories that were later used by Planck himself and others to indeed identify that light is both, in fact, everything, all matter has both functions of a particle and waves. And so would Mr. Planck then eat his lederhosen? Or would he simply say, damn, I should have thought more before I made that promise. It was a bad promise. It was a bad supposition on his part, poorly informed. He didn't know enough information. Likewise me. I didn't. Well, that's not quite the same, because maybe at the time Max Planck didn't know enough. Maybe nobody knew enough about the universe to even have any good reason to think it might be particles. Someone must have been thinking about it, because Einstein and Planck were contemporaries. So you get the point. So I think that what this whole experience has taught me is to back off from when someone asks me what would make you believe. I think I have to revert back to the person that, like I said before, that said, I don't know what it would take to make me believe, but God certainly would, and has chosen not to demonstrate that to me. And pointing out as well that I whatever it is, I hold on to a pretty high standard of evidence. So apologize if it sounds like I'm backing out. I think I've got good reason to withdraw my offer, so to speak. It feels a little bit like a bridegroom saying, I withdraw. No, bride saying, I withdraw. You, sir, I withdraw my hand from marriage when I found out you're actually a scoundrel. If I had only known at the time, I would never have agreed to marry you, sir. Good day. Listen to myself. Watch out what I promise. Next, another error. So now we're getting on to it. Genesis 5, from Adam to Noah. This is the first chapter with the whole damn chapter is begets. It's not very long, and it covers 10 generations from Adam to Noah's sons, his 3 sons. For some reason, I'm picturing in my head that my 3 sons, with the feet, whatever the theme song was. But he had 3 sons, and so the second error was that the chapter proceeds as follows. It introduces Adam, and then Adam's son, Seth, and then Seth's son, and I can remember Methuselah was in there somewhere. 9 generations down, you run into Noah, and then Noah's 3 sons. And at that point, it ends. And I realized that this was kind of like this was a way forward machine, a go forward machine. Like if it was a literary vehicle, it's a way of getting us forward. And I did the math. I counted up all the time. Well, here's where the error came in. I was curious how much time there was between Adam and Noah, so I got out my calculator and these guys lived to 800 or 900 years old, almost 1,000 in Methuselah's case back then. So I made a mistake. I started totaling them up. Okay. Not Adam lived 930 years. Okay, and then Seth lived, 960 years or something. No, that was Methuselah or whatever it was. And I totaled them all up, and I hit total at the end, and the number came up 8,000 years. And here's where my error came in. I literally went. I was sitting at the kitchen table eating my eggs with the dog. I give him little bites, and he comes out of the bedroom to join me when I have my eggs. And I think I startled the dog because I went, aha! And I even stuck my finger up in the air. I went, well, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Aha! And it was 8,100 something years. Because you may remember that, there's the great young Earth, new Earth, old Earth, new Earth, young Earth, old Earth debate, right? Do you believe that, the Bible literally about the age of the Earth, or would you follow, science that it's 4.5 billion years old, the Earth, or the Bible that says it's about 6,000 years old? And so we kind of take that 6,000 year mark, and I was immediately, suspicious, because just the time between, and those of you who are, most of you have already spotted the error, right? You're probably always going, Kurt, Kurt, you did it wrong. Yeah, I'll get to it in a second. I finally figured it out. It took me 20 minutes. Not as fast as all that. Sorry. But anyway, I went, wait a minute. How can the Earth be 8,000 or 6,000 years old if there was 8,000 years between the generations, between Adam and Noah, and that's not even the flood yet? And what about all the time after that? There's at least 2,000 years between Christ's birth and now, right? I mean, so I was like, yeah, I should have known what a moron I was. I mean, like nobody had ever pointed that out before. Had ever spotted that error. So then well, you may remember, and the reason I did that was because the whole 6,000 year thing, that's the result of, remember old Bishop James Usher? And here I'm joining the 91. This is what the shortcut got me here about 5 minutes faster. I did the math. So I paid $4 to save 5 minutes. Not an equitable trade, I think, but it was kind of fun to drive over there. It was Bishop Usher that came up with the 6,000 year thing, right? I mean, he was an Irish clergyman who is famous for a couple of things, but probably most famous for sitting down one season and going through the Bible, and without a calculator, with an abacus or whatever, slide rule something, he did the math and figured out how old the Earth was. And he came up with an astonishing figure. He came up with it was like he said the Earth was created on the 22nd of October at 6 p.m. no less. What's I mean, that's gotta scratch some heads. I mean, even in Genesis 5, we don't get any specific. I mean, how can he come up with 6 p.m.? We don't. All we know is that the age of these men when they begat the next generation. We'd have to, if you're going to get down to 6 p.m. Hugs, something. It says on the side of that van. If we're going to get that, we'd have to have more detail than that. But anyway, I'm way off track. Let me try to steer myself back on course. So, I thought I had discovered a fatal flaw. Until I suddenly realized, wait a minute, that's not how it works out. You can't do that, Kurt. You can't take the absolute age of each of these men and then total them all up and do it. You've got to take it from the age that they were when they were begat the next generation. And that's precisely, and kudos to the authors of Genesis 5, because they actually included that specific information, which I'm sure Bishop Usher utilized. Right? It says that Adam was 130 years old when he begat Seth, and there was no mention of Cain and Abel or any of the other myriad children that he must have had, although it does say that they had many others, and I know why. I was so curious about that. Why didn't they mention the other kids? And a very, very clear reason why. We're trying to follow the lineage down to Noah, because Noah's the next big player in the story. So all these other kids, sure, they have their own lineage, but they're not as significant in the story because they don't lead to Noah. So that makes all sense. So kudos to the Bible. Kudos to the Bible for showing the proper vehicle. I mean, I think that's some pretty cool stuff, that it gave the proper vehicle for to follow the trail from the next one player down to the next. So I did the math then instead from the age at which Noah had Seth, and then Seth had his kid, the next one in line, which was, instead of going by 800, 900 years at a time, it was like 160 or 120 years at a time, and that came up with a far more reasonable number of 2, including the 500 years. Noah was 500 when he gave birth to his 3 sons. Cue the music and the feet. And that led us to like 2,100, 2,200, I can't quite remember, years after creation. So kudos. Maybe Bishop Usher was, that would have been pretty good. That's a quarter of that's a third of the way, right? If the 6,000 years. So that's a long time. So creation happened, and there was a long time that went on. People in the earth. And I kind of like that, in terms of trying to find things that are cool and positive. I like that. If you really think about it, and don't just rely on Pastor Bob to tell you these things, but just think about it, dwell on it, do the numbers. It kind of reveals a beautiful imagery there. I mean, I can just, how when you read literature, it kind of fills in the backstory, the whole landscape of the whole thing fills in. The mind does that. It took me the whole time of reading this. I read it 3 times. It took me that, and I literally read it 3 times. Oh, maybe more than that, because I listened to it twice too, so 5 times. And then I could see the whole landscape. I'm thinking, meanwhile, all these generations, these 10 generations are unfolding from Adam to Noah. Meanwhile, all of the other children are out there populating the earth, doing all the things that they need to do. America! Those flags on the truck. We can tell we're getting towards Riverside. You see more of those monster trucks with the big American flags on the back. So, yeah, I can kind of see. So, whereas at first reading of the story, I thought, this is an empty story. I mean, this is an empty chapter. It's just begats. But now in hindsight, after reading it and listening to it a total of 5 times and thinking about it, this is the beautiful thing about this exercise. I mean, I've spent probably, since yesterday, I've spent probably at least an hour and a half reading and thinking about this thing. I see this chapter for more than it was at first glance, and I'll always think of Genesis 5 as a wow, congratulations, God, if you are really the author. You did a good job. I mean, in like 7, no, it must be 10 paragraphs, you covered 2,200 years of history, and you filled in an entire earth with people with people, and gave us a clear chain from the first man and woman right on down to the next big player in Noah. That is quite beautiful. That is quite impressive, actually. I'm sure that now, if Yahweh did come back, remember yesterday I was talking about 16-year-old Yahweh in my high school English class to my professor, my teacher, coming back, and let's just call him Mr. Duncan, because that's the name of another teacher that I really respected. I can't remember his real name. I also had a female teacher, and I get confused because in high school she was the one that showed me Thoreau. Let's just say, for the sake of utility, Mr. Duncan. Let's say it comes back to Mr. Duncan, and Mr. Duncan says, "What's this with this Genesis 5? It doesn't. It's begat. What is that? And Yahweh says, yeah, but why don't you take that home and think about it for a little bit. Try to use your imagination to let that chapter sink in and fill in everything. And I imagine next day Mr. Duncan's going to come back and say, yeah, wow, just kind of like the revelation, no pun intended, that I had. Wow, yeah, that is actually beautiful. And then Yahweh would just be kind of sitting there, with a smile on his face, saying, yeah, see, I do good work. And then Mr. Duncan probably say, well, it's good for literature. It ain't going to fly as a bestseller, though. Which is not true, because the Bible is a perennial bestseller. Right, number two behind the blank journals, I think. So kudos to the Bible. And I think this is, and I really do want to offer the Bible, the authors of Genesis, congratulations. I see it now. I see how, I don't see the light, but I see how chapter 5 is, I see something very beautiful in there, very special. Now maybe someone, a Bible scholar, could come out and say, yeah, Kurt, but that's how they all did it back in the days. I mean, you filled in, it was like the Wayback Machine. You know how, like, you know, in like 1970s era TV shows like Batman, when you want to change time, you know, like Batman's going to go from the Batcave to the scene of the crime, and we would have that kind of that spiral thing in, and that would spiral screen come up, and then it would go and we all knew that he was changing to one place to another, right? It was a vehicle for that process. And you saw that in like an Austin Powers, you know, to retro type of film would do that as well. Maybe that's exactly what this is, and so maybe I'm offering the Bible more congratulations than it deserves. Maybe this would have been a common. Remember, a lot of this was oral tradition, so maybe that's exactly yeah, I like that. Watch out, something in the road. Maybe that's imagine sitting around the fire, the ancient Hebrews or the Mesopotamians or the Egyptians sitting on the fire, and the storyteller is recounting a 3-hour-long tale of creation, and now it's time to fast forward 2,200 years, and he does so not by saying, because how pedestrian and boring would that be? Not by saying, okay, now we move forward 2,000 years. No, instead he says, and how? And you imagine all the children sitting on the fire, you know, the little ones kind of resting in their mother's arms, you know, and not kind of nodding off, and the older ones, you know, wide awake and, you know, enraptured in the story. And the storyteller, the you know, somewhat of a mystic person says, and now Adam begat Seth in his 130th year. And Adam then walked with the Lord an additional 800 years and died and was back with the Lord at 930 years. And the wide-eyed children thinking, wow, 930 years. And then Seth was 160 when he begat his son, who is the apple unto the eye of the Lord, no pun intended. And then Seth lived an additional 720 years. Yeah, you know that. You know, especially when back in the fire time, when you need time to fill, right? That makes sense too. So I kind of back off a little bit. Maybe it's not that it was such a clever thing, which it is a clever thing, but it was so much more out of necessity. I mean, you're sitting every night at the fireplace in the fire. There's no TV or radio to entertain you, so you got to have some storyteller. You know, hey, you know, Joseph, come over here. You know, tell us about creation. Tell us about Adam, his sons, and Seth, and the lineage all the way down to Noah. And then he unfolds he could take those first 5 chapters, and if he did a good job, he could spend 2 or 3 hours talking about that. By then, everyone's ready for bed. Maybe that's what it was. So, anyway, anything else I got to say about this? So, I can see that now, when I get on to chapter 6, which probably won't be tomorrow, because I'm going to take the weekends off. It'll be next Monday. When we get to chapter 6, this should get interesting, because we start off with Noah and his kids and all that's going to happen there. Is there anything I want to comment on more about chapter 5? I'm going to point out any differences between the New International and King James. There was a difference in what was that? So I found the New International to be clearer. You know, I think it was the opening lines of that chapter. I read them both. I was actually reading them side by side. I found the New International to be clearer in more plain spoken English, so to speak. And in so doing, it kind of took away the authority of the middle, you know, the more medieval. I'm not the right word, but you know, the old style English had more authority to it. Anything else? I feel like I'm missing something. Heaven knows I've talked long enough. I guess that's it. So chapter 5, from Adam to Noah, and I've really enjoyed these first 5 chapters. I have a feeling that we're starting to head. Oh, I did have something else I wanted to say, and that was that like I said yesterday, I mentioned yesterday that chapter 4 was probably the beginning of the end for a lot of people who read the Bible, because they're like, come away. What did I just read? What was the importance of that? This one as well. The first time I read chapter 5, the first one through, I was like, oh, okay, this is just filler. Now I see it because of this exercise itself. I see it as something valuable. I see it as something actually beautiful. But if you don't give it that thought and reread it a couple of times, this could be the beginning of the end for actually reading the Bible. I have a feeling that a lot of people, like I did when I was a Christian, don't actually read the whole Bible. They may open up with Genesis with a determination as I have now to make it through all the way through the Bible, and then peter out somewhere around. I mean, you're lucky if you get to Numbers. I mean, probably in Exodus. Exodus has got some good stuff, but probably after all the fireworks in Exodus, you get on to like something like Numbers, or like, because there's a lot of empty space between Exodus and Deuteronomy and Leviticus. Empty space in terms of, it's like, what, huh, what, wait, who, what? And then that's when you stop reading it, and then, or you skip ahead to the New Testament, because of course that's where the mother lode is. Or you just say from then on, I trust it, or you open it randomly and read a chapter or a couple of verses, or you rely on something like a Bible app to pick and choose those for you, or you just let Pastor Bob or Pastor Jenny on the weekend tell you what's what. And I think with that I'm going to stop. And last thing, I knew there was something else. That's what I was waiting for. I did some math. I was curious, and I was curious how long this would take me if I really do read the whole darn thing. And I think I can do this, because like I said, before I even started recording this, I had already been doing this for more than a year. I just simply rewound to Genesis. I mean, I literally was doing this, and I had made it all the way up to not Joseph, Samuel 1, 1 Samuel. I was like at 1 Samuel 26 when I stopped, and I had skipped ahead, as people had sometimes suggest I do. I had skipped ahead to the New Testament and gone through the Gospels as well, just to make sure I wasn't getting bogged down in the Old Testament. And people, I have received some comments and email from people suggesting I do that. I'm sure that there are some that would say, gosh darn it, you're gonna spend too much time on the Old Testament, which kind of is only half the picture, and it's the uninteresting half of the picture. So I did some math, and I asked Siri how many chapters there are in the Bible, and if you divide those chapters up by 365, it came out to be 3.2 years. That's as if I did it every day, so that's including the weekends. Then I was curious how long it would take me to get to the New Testament doing the same math, and it turned out that was 2.5 years. Again, including the weekends, which I'm not planning to do. So that means I'm gonna be in this Old Testament. If I do this the way I plan, I'm gonna be in the Old Testament, and that is how I'm going to do it. I've already done the skipping ahead part. And I'm going to be in the Old Testament for at least 2.5, maybe over 3 years. I mean, the Old Testament for over 3 years. And then it won't be like until like 4 years plus probably that I'm going to finish the whole darn thing. That's a lot of work and a lot of time. And I'm going to do my best to do it. I think I can do this. And so what I'm going to also do, because the main vehicle for this is YouTube. I am also uploading these videos onto Facebook, but that's only kind of like a secondary thing. YouTube is my main place. So I'm going to divide these up into playlists, because you can only put 200 videos in a playlist. So I'm putting these videos into a Genesis playlist, and all the chapters will be there. I think I can fit them all in. And then likewise on and on and on. And I did think about breaking this off into a separate channel, but no, I'm going to put it all on one. Those days are done. No more channels. And it is. And if you're wondering, what's this doing to my subscriber count? It's just plummeting. In fact, it would be fun to actually, that would be fun to do. Maybe I'll take a screenshot of that and share that on Facebook, and show what's happened. I mean, people are just abandoning me in droves. I'm sure they're like, what the? In fact, I saw one comment from one guy who said, I've been away for a while, I came back, and Kurt's doing Bible study? I'm sure after he left his comment, he quickly hit the unsubscribe button. And that's okay too. Like I think I've said with other things, I have no problem burning down my playlist, burning down my subscriber count in the channel. Was it Emerson who said, consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds? Yeah, that's right. So there will be no consistency on my channel. I will upload whatever interest or activity is current in the moment now, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I can see this one through. So that's it. Thanks for joining me this long video. Sorry, so long, but and for a short chapter at this length. What am I going to do when I get into Exodus and we get those chapters that go on for 3 pages? Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Have a great day. Dare I say, have a blessed day? Is that blasphemy? I don't know. Take care.